Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on your time zone. Welcome to today's webinar. We will get started in about 1 minute. We still have quite a few people logging in, so we'll give them a second to join, and then we will get started. Okay, it looks like the logging in has slowed down, so we'll get going. Welcome, everyone. I'm Kim Brown with the Montana Pre-ETS Technical Assistance Center, and I'll be your moderator for today. This webinar is sponsored by the Montana Pre-Employment Transition Services Technical Assistance Center and is funded in whole or in part under a contract with the Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services. The statements shared in today's presentation do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the department. All attendees are currently muted. This helps to cut down on background noise. If you do want to ask the presenters a question or make a comment, please type your question or comment into the chat box. Only you, the moderator, myself, and the presenters will be able to see what you've typed into the chat box. So during the question and answer times, I will read your comments or your questions out loud for the presenters and so that other audience members will know what you've asked. We will have several question and answer periods during the session. Feel free to type your questions in at any time, and then I will just read those when we have a question and answer period. Please note that the raise your hand option is not available during this webinar. We've had problems with that in the past, so chat will be the only way to ask questions, or you may email me or the presenters afterwards. If you don't see the chat box on your screen, if you go to the upper right-hand side of the screen, there should be an orange box with a white arrow in it. If you click on that orange box, it should open a dashboard and you should see the chat box or the question box in there. For those of you who requested Montana Office of Public Instruction renewal units when you registered, those will be emailed to you after the webinar, and it can take up to a couple of weeks for us to get those emailed out. Please note that you do have to have pre-registered and requested the OPI credit in order to receive that. And please note also that we're unable currently to issue other kinds of attendance documentation. Today's session is being audio taped for the Pre-ETS Resource Library, and the recording for the webinar will be posted to the Montana Vocational Rehabilitation and Blind Services YouTube channel as soon as possible. And I've posted the URL or website address for that YouTube channel in the chat box if you're interested in copying that down. It can take a couple of weeks for that video to be posted. The slides for today's presentation and several other resources are currently available for download in the handouts area on your screen. Again, if you don't see the handouts area, go to that orange box with the white arrow in it on the upper right-hand side of your screen. Click on that and you should see the handouts if you'd like to download or print those. When you log out of today's session, a short survey will pop up. Please do take the time to answer those 8 questions or so on the survey. We go through all of the survey responses and we use those to plan future webinars and also to try and continually improve the training that we're offering. So again, please do take the time to complete that survey. Also, as you're completing the survey, please let us know if you would like a full webinar on any of the topics that you hear discussed today, the MCIS system, discovery, or any of the other subjects that the presenters will be speaking about. Do let us know that in your evaluation. With that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speakers for today and tell you a little bit about each one, and then we'll go ahead and turn it over to the presenters. Today we have Ellen Condon. Ellen is the Director of the Pre-Employment Transition Services Technical Assistance Center. She's also the Director of the Transition and Employment Projects and of the Montana Deaf-Blind Project at the University of Montana's Rural Institute for Inclusive Communities, where she's worked since 1996 on transition and employment for youth with significant disabilities. Ellen is also a consultant with Mark Gold & Associates, and she serves as a subject matter expert for the Office of Disability Employment Policy at the U.S. Department of Labor on the Employment First State Leadership Mentor Project. Ellen has worked in the field of developmental disabilities since 1986. Prior to coming to Montana, her experiences included hands-on service delivery, program development, and program management in community, residential, and supported employment programs. We also have with us today Mary DiBiase. Mary serves as the geographic lead for the PREETS Technical Assistance Center with the Great Falls Vocational Rehabilitation Office and affiliated schools. As a certified special educator, Mary brings hands-on experience, knowledge, and skills critical to school staff. She also brings experience from her work as project coordinator with Montana Youth Transitions, as well as from her time as a job training program supervisor for the Montana Department of Labor Workforce Services Division. Mary has experience with curriculum development and training for parents, youth with disabilities, educators, and counselors regarding transition services in Montana and how to teach employment readiness skills to youth. We also have with us today Donetta McDowell. Donetta has worked for the Montana Department of Labor and Industry for the past 12 years, 10 of those years with the Montana Career Resources, which include free career exploration publications K through adult, and the MCIS, or Montana Career Information System program. The MCIS program is a comprehensive online career exploration tool that is free to all Montanans. Thanks again to all of our presenters and to all of our audience members, and with that, I will turn it over to Ellen Condon.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, so I just wanted to give you just a quick, brief overview of the mission of the Pre-Employment Transition Services Technical Assistance Center mission. We were developed last year. We started October 1, and basically we are contracting with Department of Health and Human Services, Vocational Rehabilitation and Blind Services to support VR and the schools to provide quality pre-employment transition services to students with disabilities. So basically what PREETS is about is looking at working with students with disabilities in the schools much earlier and collaboratively between schools and Voc Rehab to make sure all students with disabilities, regardless of kids with real significant disabilities to kids who may have a 504 plan or kids who may not even have a formal plan and do have a disability. But basically we work earlier and collaboratively to ensure that people are college and career ready by offering pre-employment transition services. We're also working within the state to facilitate systems change by researching what other states are doing, looking at innovative ideas, sharing these ideas through webinars, through on-site trainings, through product development. We will provide technical assistance to schools and to Voc Rehab and to agencies. And we're helping forge collaborations focused on competitive integrated employment for all students. So we're thinking paid employment, minimum wage or better, in the community for all of our students, even kids with the most significant disabilities. My contact information is here. We also have a lot more information on the DPHHS Transitions website. We have TAC members in Conrad, which is where Mary DiBiase is. We have Roger Shelley based in Roberts. We have Teresa Baldry in Miles City. We have Kim in Canada. We are hiring a new person in Missoula to help with some of the Bozeman Butte areas. And we also have a subcontract with MSU Billings, so John Keener covers the Highline and Deb Miller covers the Billings region. So if you are a school that wants information about contracting with Voc Rehab for pre-employment transition services, or you have a question or a need, please contact me or anybody else on the team. And we are continually developing products to help implement this project. So we look forward to today's webinar, and I'll talk to you more in a bit. Right now, I'm going to change it back to Mary.
Thank you, Ellen. We'll take a second and get it switched over to my presentation. Okay. So as was introduced, I am Mary DiBiase. I have two roles in transition. One is the geographic lead with the PREETS project under Rural Institute, and the other is the project coordinator for Montana Youth Transitions that I will talk a little bit about later. So when we're discussing transition assessments, we are specifically talking about them today in terms of how to use them for students who are transitioning from high school into adulthood. Now, a lot of this information can be applicable to older students or young adults or adults in general. And if you work for an agency outside of the school setting, such as with Voc Rehab or Independent Living or DD or other family support agencies, the information will be applicable as well. But because of my background as a teacher and working in workforce development, a lot of what I'm going to reference is how it can be used in the IEP process. So IEPs that include a transition component must include post-secondary assessments. And I'll talk a little bit about what those assessments can look like in a minute. But the reason that the IEP needs to include those assessments is to provide the basis for what the transition goals come from. We are going to look at the assessments in three broad categories: education, employment, and independent living. Now, there's assessments that address more specific topics such as assistive technology or recreation, social skills, etc. But typically those assessments still fall within those three main categories, so I think we'll be able to tie to those broad categories in almost all cases. But if you have any questions about that, I will stop in a little while and ask for additional questions. Before we continue, I do want to make the point that transition planning really does need to have a student component. We always hear in transition and really anything that's disability related, the term "nothing about us without us." So we need to make sure that students are part of the assessment process, that students are taught how assessments are used and how the results work, that the results and information is relevant to students as well as to the adults. And so if you're looking for what assessments to provide as part of the transition evaluation process, make sure that you're also looking for assessments that are student-based. This is going to help engage students in their high school education plan. Once students have a better idea of why they're working on certain skills or how it's relevant to them past the high school environment, it's going to be much more meaningful in terms of why they are working on certain skills or taking certain classes or provided certain opportunities. The transition assessment process also does help engage other stakeholders, and I wanted to make note of that. So if you're trying to engage parents or community service providers, counselors, other teachers in the building as well, have them be part of the assessment process as well. I think as teachers, because of our limited amount of time to get things done and not really sure what direction to go in, and it gets to be cumbersome, we tend to want to do all the work on our own. So I just want to make the point, please look at who else can be part of this process and ensure that students are part of it as well. Okay, so when we're looking at transition assessments, as I said, there's three broad categories that we're going to look at this through. And in this case, transition, because we're referring to the transition from high school into adulthood, there's three overarching questions, and these are really the goal-setting questions. So the questions, where do I want to learn after completing high school? Where do I want to work after completing high school? And where do I want to live after completing high school? I look at this as the first tier of assessments. So if we're trying to determine the general answers to these questions or what the general goals of the students are, these are the three main questions we want to answer. Assessments in this tier may or may not be necessary depending on the student's background, their interest, their previous experience in these three areas. They may already know what they would like to do or where they want to live or learn or work. And so you can pick and choose on this level just depending on what the student already knows. So once those three initial goals are set, we have the second tier or the second level of questions that really reflect what's going to happen to make those goals achievable for the students. The first question that the first question was, where does the student want to learn after completing high school? So we need to ask then, what do I need to learn now to be able to learn where I would like to after completing high school? So in order to reach that goal, what do I need to do during the high school years in order to make that happen? So these would be the education assessments. Possibly could include some self-determination or advocacy assessments. We know that the transition from high school to college can be rather challenging for some students because we go from an IEP essentially to a 504 where students have to advocate for themselves. There's no one standing up for them anymore. They need to know what their disability is. They need to know what accommodations they need. They need to know how to talk to others that they don't know about and in terms of asking for those things. So that may need to be part of the education planning. It also may need to include study skills and resources to make learning possible in a higher education setting. Do we need to look at academic alignment? So what classes are they taking in high school that will relate to their college experience? And also it may need to include some career development to know what education is needed. If we don't need a college education, then what education do we need in order to work successfully or learn successfully or live successfully as an adult? The second area, what do I need to learn now to be able to work where I would like to after completing school? So these are the vocational and employment assessments. This is the area that we're going to be talking most about during this webinar, and the next two presenters are going to give some specific information about types of assessments that can be done in this for employment related goals. But this kind of goal would include career and interest and development, soft skills, where are they at in terms of learning to work with other people and make that workplace successful, time management, the work skills that they need to be able to do specific occupations. All of those are examples of vocational assessments. And then the third category, what do I need to learn now to be able to live where I would like to after completing high school? So once a student has a goal in terms of what setting they would like to live in, possibly what area geographically they'd like to live in, how independent and what they would like to do during their life. This is the type of assessments you would be doing. So might be looking at community participation, might be looking at leisure and recreation, could be looking at personal care, financial literacy, anything under that really isn't to do with education or vocational fits under this category. So when we're talking about transition assessments, and I'm pointing this out just because we hear these terms commonly during the conversations around transition assessments. But there really are two major types of assessments that can be used through any planning process, but through an IEP-specific transition planning process. We have formal assessments and informal assessments. A lot of what we're talking about today are informal assessments, but formal assessments can be a good resource to use. They typically cost money. They don't always, but a lot of times they're the more formal types of assessments that you might get through ProEd catalogs or something like that. A lot of times they are norm referenced. They don't have to be, but if they are, they would be a formal assessment. They are a good starting point for kind of determining what needs to come next. Informal assessments are typically inexpensive or even free. They even could be teacher-made. There isn't a norming process, and they can be more subjective, and that may be a disadvantage to this. But in order to take care of this subjective problem, that's where you want to make sure that you're doing an assessment from a lot of different perspectives, from the student, the teachers, the parents, other professionals, so that there's a well-rounded perspective of whatever topic you're looking at. We do want to make sure that documentation still occurs during informal assessments. So when we are making observations in academic or work environments, or when we're talking with students about likes and dislikes, if you have a form that asks questions about what a place that you can answer that question so it's documented so that you can tell who did the assessment, all of that is available and can be documented in the IEP, and it can be shown where that information comes from. Okay, so types of informal assessments could be things like observation. When we're observing a student in a classroom setting or in a work environment, or possibly looking at some kind of skill in the community that we're working with them on. This is a place where we can record that data, we can make observations about what they have mastered, what they need to continue to work on, how it affects others around them, all of those kinds of things. Interviews and questionnaires. This can be either structured or unstructured conversations, but it's typically a form that has a question and answer format so that students, parents, teachers, supervisors, whoever is doing the interview or the questionnaire can write down what they see or what they notice about the student, or what the student notices about their own circumstances. Environmental analysis is something that we commonly overlook, and that's examining the environment which an activity normally occurs. So if we're working at purchasing something at a store and knowing the process for how to use the right money and making sure you have the right change and finding the product on the shelf, we can do simulated experiences with that in the school setting, but we would also want to make sure that we're applying it to the real world setting. So that's just an example of knowing what the environment is, making sure that we are teaching all the variables that might come into play. And then we have curriculum-based assessments. We might have a portfolio that we're looking at different goals that we're working on in different classes. We have work samples that we're going to analyze and see what we need to improve on or what we've already mastered. Okay, so now, like I said, the category that we're going to look at the most is the vocational and employment assessments. And this is an area that we hear most about when we're talking about transition. And we hear a lot about needing to make sure that a student knows what they want to do after high school, what that job entails, how they can get the skills that they need to know in order to be able to work in that job. And there's a lot of assessments that have little or no cost in this category, but there's also a lot of assessments that don't necessarily cover all of the things that we want to consider. So we want to look at personal discovery information, and that's the category that I title is the category that includes things like learning styles and multiple intelligence. Learning styles and knowing what your skills are can be a very powerful and valid result-oriented assessment for students particularly, but also for parents and teachers that might not know the student very well. So if a student is learning to study in high school and then would look at translating those skills into the college environment, or even if they have skills that they need to learn in the workplace, how best do they learn those skills? Are they an oral learner? Auditory? Do they need to speak what they've learned, so making it oral? Are they very visual? Are they hands-on? Are they a combination in there? Knowing that information about oneself makes it a heck of a lot easier to get through life. I know even as an adult, I know what I need. I need to see things visually in order to really internalize it. So having a student have that information can really make a lot of difference. And then an area that we don't hear a lot about is looking at multiple intelligence. And if you haven't looked at that or know much about that, in the next slide I have a resource for you to look at an assessment that covers that. But we all have strengths as individuals. Some of us are very musical. Some of us are very scientific or mathematical. Some of us are very linguistic. Some of us are great working with our hands. And I think students, no matter who they are in high school, lose that perspective that you don't just have to be good at math and reading to be a successful learner, that we all have talents that we need to explore. And the multiple intelligence assessment really gives a student an idea of where their strengths lie and how they can translate those strengths into the work environment. This is also a very powerful tool when you have a student that has a vocational goal that you maybe think doesn't fit where the student's abilities are, or you think maybe they would be very unhappy, but you can't tell them that you say no to their goal. But if you do a multiple intelligence assessment, you can have a student look at what really are they good at and what occupations fit in that goal, and it just is another perspective to look at all of the possibilities as an adult worker. Interest inventory assessments, there's a plethora of them. Later on we'll hear a summary of the MCIS assessment that we have in Montana. There are a bunch of other ones as well. I did include some in the next slide that can complement the classroom environment to help students learn how some of their interests might apply to occupations. So work skills assessments are assessments that show you how well work is completed. It also might show you what soft skills a student needs to continue to work on. We all know that soft skills in the workplace are incredibly important for any of us to keep our jobs. They tend to be the reason most of us get fired, not because we're doing our job wrong, but because we're not navigating the workplace and all of the cultural and social aspects very well. So what can we do to help students learn those skills before they leave high school? And then structured assessment from work settings. If you have students that are working on work-based learning opportunities, so job shadows, work experiences, that kind of thing, what knowledge can we get from those settings to help the student develop goals for their next IEP or the next steps from that. We don't want to just have one work setting and say we've checked off that box, therefore they've had access to that. We want to use those work settings as stepping stones into developing more goals with the student. I'm going to go back one more. Okay, there's one more thing I wanted to add on this. Under the structured assessment from work settings, number 3 and number 4 both are an observation of skill sets for students. These are the work behaviors and skills that students offer to potential employers. And you know, in the slide that I talked about students being involved in the assessment process, this is crucial for them to be part of, because if students know what skills that they have, they're able to describe their skill set relative to any given job in an interview. But they also know then if there's an assessment that an employer did in a work setting that said they needed improvement in certain areas, then that gives them an area that they know that they need to keep working on in order to maintain that employability. So we want to look at that as, or both of these items as skill sets that students are developing and that they're an integral part of that development. Okay, so here are some free inventories and assessments that I have used in my teaching and I've come across. I'm not going to go into each one specifically, but the links are here and you have access to this PowerPoint so you can explore them as well, because we are going to run short on time here. But there are some learning styles inventory here that is a free download. There are 2 multiple intelligence inventories. The first one results in an assessment that really is more applicable to adult literacy and education and has just a different type of question that is asked. Laura Candler, the second from the bottom, Laura Candler Multiple Intelligence Survey, she has done a lot of work in multiple intelligence and really has made this an assessment that is applicable to a wide range of students, everyone from about 4th grade all the way through high school, and has leveled the information so that students can be looking at across those grade levels and just have a better understanding of who they are as individuals. So those are just some free inventories that you can use at your leisure. And 2 websites that I want to point out. If you are a teacher, you probably have already used teacherspayteachers.com, but it's a great resource for any teaching material, not just for core subjects that you would typically find in the school setting. There are a lot of employment-related assessments and materials and curricula. Some of the stuff does have a fee associated with it, but the nice thing about it is you're paying a teacher that's developed it. You're not paying a corporation, so I liked that a lot as a teacher, that I was supporting a professional in my field. I came across Laura Candler's information in there, and she has a very nice, easy-to-use curriculum and assessment for the multiple intelligence information. And then the next website is Montana Youth Transitions, and that is the project that I also work under, and I'm going to show you that website just for a couple minutes before I change the webinar over to Ellen, because this website really is anything to do with transition. But one of the things that we included on the website is information for professionals, and as I'm talking I'm going to move over to that website. But this is a website that is being, every day it looks a little different because we're always adding new material as it becomes available. On the top you see the top navigational bar that there's information specific to youth in their transition planning, to parents as they're working with their child through that transition planning, and for professionals. On the right-hand side, there is a soft skills tab that I'm just going to point out very briefly because there's a free curriculum that we have developed through the Transitions Project. In that curriculum is also an informal assessment that can be used for students and teachers to work together to see what soft skills a student needs to continue to work on to really enhance their employability. But under professionals, there's an educators tab. And under that, there are 2 areas, one for assessment and one for curriculum resources. The curriculum resources I won't go into today because we're talking about assessment specifically, but there are some examples of curriculum for those 3 different areas if you're looking for free and usable curriculum to work with your students or clients. But what I wanted to point out, and since we don't have a lot of time to go into them specifically, I want to point out where you can find information that you can, when you have some time just to sit around and play with it, see what's available to you. A lot of people nationwide have been looking at transition assessments and have done a lot of work that really we could take advantage of and not have to recreate the wheel. And that's what we're trying to do here, is just make all of these resources available in one place so that you don't have to do as much searching on the web and trying to find folks that have used different assessments and to understand what's available to you. A lot of these are informal assessments because I've tried to make things available that are free or have very low cost. There's a couple that I want to point out specifically. One is the South Bend Community School Corporation in Indiana has a very nice website that I wanted to point out because they've done a lot of work of putting a whole plethora of assessments together that you can download for free. And as you can see, there's categories, there's assessments in all of the categories. So there's education assessments, there's employment assessments, there's independent living assessments, and then at the bottom there's self-advocacy assessments. So this is a great place to go when you're looking for assessments that meet your specific students' needs, because as we know, there's students, well, there's a wide range of students that we're working with. We have students that maybe don't read well or read at all that we need to have pictures for, or we need to do more interviews and observation with. And there's students that really read well, but they need some help in pinpointing what goals to set. So there's a nice breadth of assessment available here on this site. And then this Oregon Department of Education Transition Community has assessments as well as resources for parents and teachers. So you'll see there's learning styles inventories, there's independent living inventories, self-determination and self-advocacy is really applicable to all three of those areas because a student needs to learn how to talk to people that they may not be comfortable with or they may not know, and that's a whole set of skills that they need to develop. The nice thing about this AIR self-determination assessment is there's a student assessment, a parent assessment, and an educator assessment. And so this does allow you the opportunity to have everyone do the assessment, and you can combine that information and make some meaningful goals related to that. Under the employment assessments, there are different informal assessments, but the one thing I wanted to point out was there's some examples of work experience evaluation forms on here. So if you do have a student that is working in a work experience setting or a job shadow setting, there's a form available for students to fill out to evaluate how they think it went and what went well or what didn't go so well, as well as determining how that opportunity meshed with what their career goals are. Did it make them realize that they really want to work with a certain set of skills that they hadn't thought of before? Are there things that they hated about it that they don't want to have anything to do with? It's a nice interest summary. And then there's an evaluation form for the supervisor to look at how well the student did in certain areas. Are there things they need to improve on, etc. So with that, are there any questions that folks have about assessments in general? And I know that this was a very broad overview of transition assessments, but really what I wanted to do is to point out some places that you could go and maybe find some of those resources. So Kim, are there any questions?
Mary, there haven't been any questions submitted yet, so we will have another question and answer period for all presenters at the end of today. So if you're still thinking of questions for Mary, there will be another chance. There have been a few people asking about the PowerPoint for today, and it is available in the handouts section on your screen. It's a PDF file, so you do need to have a PDF reader of some kind on your computer in order to be able to open that. Most computers have Adobe or something else that will allow them to open PDF files. If you've tried clicking on the link and it didn't work, give it another try. I've tested it several times now on a couple different computers, and it does seem to be working for me. And I haven't heard from very many people that it's not working, but give it another try. If you're still having problems, let me know, and we can connect after the webinar, and I can email it to you directly. Thanks, Mary.
Okay, so I will switch the presentation over to Ellen, and we will move on to the next part of the webinar.
Thank you, Mary. Sorry, we're moving down to my slides. And so what I'm going to introduce to you is an informal assessment, and it's called Discovery. And I want you to differentiate this discovery from the personal discovery that Mary was talking about, just for the purpose of understanding, let's call it the big D discovery. And what this is a process that's very intentional, and it's to get, the whole purpose of discovery is to get a picture of who an individual is. And it's an alternative to traditional evaluation and assessment, meaning that it's not normed, so very similar to how Mary described several of the informal assessments. The other piece is that this is a tool that I find very necessary when we're working with a student or an adult who we're just not sure how we can see them working in the community. And now with WIOA, the Work Innovation and Opportunity Act, we need to make sure that we're giving every person, every individual student in schools, that opportunity for competitive integrated employment. And so this is a tool that's going to help us look at even answering the question, what can this person do for tasks? What are their interests and preferences when they have no verbal language to tell us? What if we've never even talked about working to this population of kids or adults? That's where discovery is necessary. And again, it's a very intentional process to get a picture of who the person is. And so this can be an age-appropriate transition assessment, and while it focuses on vocational, it actually will give information across the person's entire life. So you could use it to inform post-secondary goals and independent living, as well as education, as well as employment. And this is, in many states, the process of discovery and the vocational profile is a type or choice of vocational evaluation in Voc Rehab. So this is a process that can be used for both schools as well as Voc Rehab. And so this is, the process of discovery helps uncover what the person's interests and preferences and support needs are and the conditions where they're at their best. So meaning, if I have somebody who's going to be pretty tricky to place in employment because of their impact of disability, and maybe that communicates itself through behaviors, or maybe that's somebody who has limited mobility and communication, who has a lot of medical needs, whatever factors make them particularly tricky, the process of discovery will uncover information that helps you identify where this person's going to be motivated, what environmental conditions will work for this person so it's a good job match. It's going to uncover contributions that this person could make to an employer or within a work experience, and also what are the tasks that this individual can do. Because for many of the students who need discovery, when we first start getting to know them, maybe they've just been referred to Voc Rehab, or maybe it's time to do the age-appropriate transition assessment, and we're trying to think about, okay, if we're thinking about community employment for this young person, I have no idea what they can do for an employer. This is the process that will assist you. And it's not a checklist. It's not a form to fill out. Frequently, we will capture the information that we find about a person or learn about a person in some sort of format. You don't start by filling out that form. Discovery is not a test. Nobody can fail discovery. And it's not a list of what a person cannot do. Discovery is also not putting somebody in a work assessment to see what they're good and bad at. We start with where the person's most who they are. And that's critical, because discovery really is getting a picture of who each person is, where they are most who they are. And where we start with each individual is going to depend on them. So discovery, there's a set of pretty consistent 20 steps to discovery. But each person's process of discovery is going to be individualized. So for many people, I usually start at their home in getting to know them. And I want to spend time where they're most comfortable and they're doing something they're motivated to do. And that's going to look different for each one of us and each student or adult that needs the process of discovery. And instead of trying to find out, okay, what are you good at, what do you need help with, I'm at first going to start with watching what they do, just going through the day. What are their activities of living? What do they do when they first get up in the morning? What's the routine? What does mealtime look like? How do they participate? What supports do they need? What makes their eyes light up? And I'm going to discover the unique impact of their disability. And, you know, I think when people are first looking at the process of discovery, sometimes they think that we're going to just gloss over somebody's disability. And that's not it at all. I really want to understand how somebody's disability impacts them so that I understand how their hands can work with a task, how they can get around a work environment, what kind of work environment they need. Say somebody has some serious impact sensory-wise and the acoustics will make it or break it within a work environment. I need to understand that. I need to know what that looks like, because in discovery, the end result of discovery is going to be a blueprint of what really works for this particular individual, and it might be in a work experience, it might be at home to make them more independent, or it might be in their first paid job. And part of that you're going to determine when you start the discovery process with an individual. What is your end goal at this point in time? But we're definitely not going to gloss over their disability. I just want to understand the impact of it. The label of the disability doesn't help me understand how to see them in employment. And so there's some characteristics of discovery. And Mary made a couple points that I loved. You know, one of the first ones was teachers don't need to do this on their own. If you're going to use discovery as an age-appropriate transition assessment, divide up the activities. Parents can play a role. If a community rehab program is working with the student, they can play a role. If a Voc Rehab counselor is also working with the students, they could play a role. And I'll talk more about what those roles could be, but this does not have to be just the teacher or just the Voc Rehab counselor or potentially just the rehab agency. You can divide up the activities. But one of the unique pieces of discovery is that it's very optimistic. The whole purpose of discovery is for me to find information that enables me to define a setting, a task, supports, a work environment where this person will be as successful as possible at this current point in time. And the cool thing with students is that that's going to change over time. So it's a very optimistic process. So if I'm realizing that this person is known as being somebody, or they have a label of being very slow or having these super aggressive behaviors, I'm not going to use those terms. I want to know more about their pace of work, and I also want to know more about environments in which they are successful, meaning they have fewer outbursts, or where they have a lot of outbursts, but I don't care about the labels. I want to understand, again, where they're going to be most productive, most motivated, and able to do the most tasks, because I'm thinking down the road, where are they going to be in work? The other piece of this, going back to the slide about what discovery isn't, you're looking for robust information. And think about discovery as a funnel. Like initially when you start discovery, you're going to be gathering a lot of information, and you can't jump to the final endpoint about what's this going to look like for a job for them yet, because you have to filter through the information that you're getting about this person to then filter it down to the bottom of the funnel to understand, okay, from this information, what have I learned are the ideal conditions for success? What are the tasks? What are the skills this person has and the contributions that they're going to bring? And what environments will match that? So you'll start with a lot of robust information. Like you might start collecting some stories, some oral stories from families and teachers and paraprofessionals about what happened in a situation. You're going to filter that into the information that's important. And it's going to be a lot of descriptive information instead of, you're going to, like, let me give you an example. There was a young man that I worked with years ago, and when we first started talking about competitive integrated employment for this young man, somebody on his team said, he is so slow, who is ever going to hire him? What we needed to do was we needed to understand his pace and also how he approached tasks. And not tasks that didn't mean anything to him, but tasks that he was familiar with. And when we did watch him in the school environment, what we saw was that if the expectation was that he wait for the next directive, he was super compliant with that. He would get off the bus and he'd walk into the school and he'd just stop at the door. And an adult would tell him, walk to your locker. And he would walk to his locker and then he'd stop. And then they would say, open your locker. And he would open the locker and stop. In a different situation, we saw him working on the coffee cart at school, and he walked up to the basket that held Philadelphia cream cheese, and he flipped it upside down, and I was just watching and learning. And then he righted the basket, and he picked up each Philadelphia cream cheese package and basically did a top left center of each of the cream cheeses. So the writing all went the same way. It was all up against the left side of the basket. And so as I watched him and saw how he went through the day, I realized this is a young man who's very precise. He does things in a routine way. And so as I learned more information, I could go from those initial judgments to skills, contributions, conditions that enabled him to be independent of those prompts that we assumed he was very dependent on, which he wasn't at all. He just learned the rules of that person and that activity. However, as we saw him at home, as we saw him in work experiences, we saw all these different pieces of him. And so with discovery, you start with a lot of information and then you whittle it down to, from what I've gleaned from multiple sources of input, what does that mean in terms of What tasks can this person do? What job match is going to be the best for this person? And for that individual student, in the end, it was a job that wanted precision and high quality and handling things that were very fragile. That's where he excelled. If it was an environment that wanted really fast performance, that probably wasn't going to be a great match for him. And so as we're looking at the impact of Section 511 of WIOA, where before students under the age of 24 need to have access to competitive integrated employment and to pre-ETS before they enter a sheltered workshop, we want to make sure that we're giving them a fair chance to see what they can do themselves, and their families can see what they can do, and also we, the employment support staff, can see what they can do by making sure we know them well enough to set up an integrated employment setting that matches who they are at their best so that we can see them as successful as possible. So the other characteristics of discovery is that it's non-judgmental. I don't want to use words in my description like he does this slowly. I want to describe the pace in a way that's non-judgmental. And so it might mean changing the description from this is a young man who's prompt dependent and slow moving to from getting off the bus to getting to his locker, placing his coat, and getting his books. The whole process took a total of 10 minutes, and it was 25 yards from bus to locker, and the support person gave him 35 prompts. Here's some examples of the prompts. That's non-judgmental, that's non-comparative, that's descriptive information. And what that enables you to do is then look at that information and say, okay, does this support person know how to teach versus prompt? Does this student function like this, perform like this across all settings, or are there different settings where he's very independent and doesn't wait to be cued to do different things? Have we taught him to be cued? And so it gets you really thinking about, is our current perception and opinion of who this person is accurate, or is that something historical that has just been handed down with them? So if I'm going to do the process of discovery, I basically want to, the first question I want to ask is, what's my outcome of discovery? And this may be influenced by whether this is a student or whether this is an adult, and also what age the student is and how many experiences they've had in work so far. So if this is a student who's never been exposed to work, and I just want to get a pretty good handle on what a good job experience match is going to be for this person, my intended outcome of discovery for this point in time might be, I want to have enough information about the environment, the tasks, their support needs, so that we have a good first work experience. If this is somebody who's ready for their first paid job, then my intended outcome is going to be a paid job within a certain number of months. If this is somebody who's just landed on Voc Rehab's doorstep and they're looking for competitive integrated employment, then yep, it's a paid job right now within this given time frame. And so with students, you could do some ongoing discovery. You could revisit what you learned about them each year right before the IEP as your age-appropriate transition assessment. Or if this is a vocational evaluation, or in lieu of a vocational evaluation, maybe this discovery is just going to happen now and we're not going to revisit it until the person needs a new job. The other things we're looking for in a plan for discovery is who knows this person well? Who has pieces of information about them? It may be siblings, it may be family, it's going to be different people in the school, it may be an employer or a coworker, It may be an OT or a speech person or a PT. It may be a neighbor or a grandmother. And that's how each person's plan looks a little bit different. Where I want to get to know the person's also going to look different. For one young man, when Kim and I were doing discovery, instead of going to his house, his family suggested that we go see him at the local hospital, which sounded really odd to us until they explained why. They're like, we totally get what you want to see, but his house isn't very accessible. And if you see him going to his OT or his PT appointment, you'll really see him at his best. You'll see him interacting with people who like him. You'll see how his physical disability impacts him, but you'll also see how independent he can be in a setting that's more accessible to him. For somebody else, it might be, watching them haul hay and feed their animals if you're out working in Hilger or Lewistown. For somebody else, it might make sense that I'm going to watch them swim because swimming's a big part of their life, or play the violin because that's a big piece of who they are, or weave something. So each person's array of places you get to know them and what you see for activities and what you participate in for activities, it's going to change based on who that person is. So the who, what, where. You're going to want to define who that is for people, but it'll look unique. And you could spend years in discovery and have a blast with it. You don't want to do that. That's why you want to define your end goal of discovery. What do we need to know at this point in time for the intended outcome? And think about, for people who need intense discovery, think about putting together a puzzle of who they are and what their first ideal, well-matched work experience or job is going to be. And so as you're figuring out who to glean information from, you got to figure out who might have a piece of that puzzle for you. And so again, like there's people at school that have different perspectives of students. Like I've learned a lot in the past from interviewing paraprofessionals who have been supporting in-school or community-based work experiences, had them write down a couple notes at the end of a work experience day or session. And sometimes they don't know what they've really learned about the person, but as they tell you performance, you can start to jot down and you start to see some themes of what works for this individual. And again, it's not going to be having them fill out a checklist. It's going to have them describe something they saw that they didn't realize this person could do, or how this person reacts to some supervisors differently from other supervisors. You're going to get a clear vision of, wow, this is a person who needs a supervisor that the first time he kind of checks out to see if these are really the rules, the supervisor is going to be really clear with him and say, look, this is how we do things here. This is the language. This is what we expect from you. And this is, these are your tasks. This is how you do them, and this is when you get them done. And then the person's fine. Part of that is we want to gather that information so when we say that this is an ideal condition, we also have these historical pieces of information that back up those opinions. And so you're going to get information from different people. And for somebody who's got more of a physical impact of disability, I definitely want to know how they use their hands, how they transfer in and out of their chair, what kind of transportation they use, what kind of supports they have, or support needs they have, and are there some creative strategies that people who know them well have figured out that I'm going to then use in the workplace or in the classroom. So the strategies for facilitated discovery, and facilitated discovery means that somebody is taking the lead in discovery and capturing this information versus somebody's doing group discovery, which is something Abby Cooper talked about a couple months ago, which could be done with a group of people at once, or self-discovery, where you're kind of coaching somebody, and this might be somebody who has more work experience and has more insight into what works and what doesn't work for them. You could use more of a self-discovery, But facilitated discovery would be used for somebody who really needs somebody else to facilitate this person-centered process of getting to know them and gleaning the information that's going to be useful to define the parameters of work or work experience for them. So some of these strategies are going to be having conversations, and it can be conversations with that individual or family, but I'm not going to ask the question, what do you want to do for work?
Ellen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're running just a bit short on time. I just wanted to give you a heads up.
Cool. Am I already over?
Yes.
Okay. So basically there's some different ways to summarize what you learn in Discovery, and we're going to do a lot more training coming up on Discovery, but I just wanted to talk about it so you would have a handle on what it is. So here's some websites that you can visit, but think about Discovery as helping you describe how somebody is going to participate, not why they can't work. And so we're going to turn this over to Donetta.
Hello everybody, this is Donetta. I am going to show my screen. And we're going to talk today about the Montana Career Information System. First of all, I'm going to show you our career resource page. I work with the Department of Labor and Industry in Montana, and we have this career resource page. So we have career resources that are available from all the way from kindergarten to adults. So you can find those publications based on schools here. The link to the website is careers.mt.gov, and you can get to this page. Then you can see more resources, teacher counselors, when we can do trainings, and you can also get to our publications page, which shows all the publications that we have available. I'm not sure why that link is not working. Oh, there it goes. It's just slow. It is not working. There's some sort of error going on, so we'll have to get that fixed. But you can find all of our publications there. Or like I said, you can just click on the icon here and get to the certain publications too. Oh, our website must be wonky right now, so that's great. Love technology when it works. There's also an MCIS login, which is just right here. It drops down. What happens is with the MCIS program is the schools or sites like Voc Rehab, high school, whatever, they will create a site for their school or agency, and then they'll be able to have access to that account. So I'm going to go into a basic account that we have. A little bit of background on MCIS is that the CIS program itself is based out of Into Careers at the University of Oregon, and they're the ones who create the program, the programming and whatnot. We have a 21-state consortium. For those of you who are at other states, you could, if you don't have a CIS program, you could join the consortium and become a CIS state, or you can find out if your state is in that consortium and offers the career information system. So I am going to go ahead and log in and show you an overview of the system. So let's see here. Skip that for now. Okay, so generally what happens is when you log in with an account, you're going to have either a site administrator account, or you're going to have a staff account, or possibly even an advisor account. And this is the back side of that where you can do the administration of the account, where you can see portfolios and other things, do reports on what your students are doing and stuff like that. So we're just going to go up here to the top and go to CIS, click this Go to CIS button, and now we are at the student side of it. So, so this is a brand new, we just got this, what we're calling the MCIS basic account. So we have different types of accounts. There's MCIS Junior, which is 5th through 8th grade, and then we have the high school account, we have college adult, and then we have the basic. So I just wanted to show you the basic because that's brand new, and it's pared down quite a bit so that it's a lot easier. It's kind of a combination between the middle school, what the middle school site is like, and what the high school side is like. So we've been talking about assessments. So we have this tab that goes across the top up here, and there's assessments. If you hover over that, you'll be able to see the different assessments that we have. Not all the assessments are available in BASIC, but several of them are. So there's an interest profiler short form. And just to show you a little bit about what it looks like, I'm going to click on it and let you see the questions. So what the student does is they click on this, they click rate the activities, and then they're just very simple questions. And do you like to build kitchen cabinets? They really like it, they're unsure, they dislike it, or they strongly dislike it. So they just click on those, lay brick or tile, and so on. You want to make sure when they're done that they save it. If they save it, it will save to their portfolio, and they'll always be able to get back to that information. I am going to skip to the end just to save time. And then in the interest profiler short form, it comes out to be whether they're investigative, conventional, social, or so on, and then it's just based on a score. And then if they click that, investigative, it shows different types of occupations that are available under investigative. And I'm not going to get too deep into this just to save time. Reality check is also another really great tool. Students, counselors, everyone really loves this reality check. And so what it is the students go through reality check. It's based just in Montana. So they choose an area in Montana. We'll just stay with Central. And then they go through and they answer these questions. What type of housing are you going to need? Are you going to live at home? Are you going to have a one-bedroom apartment? What is it that you're going to choose? And then they just go through and choose these different types of things. Oh no. Okay, there we go. And there's some of these that have multiple answers and some that just have single answers. So what type of cell phone, or do you need a cell phone? Are you going to need cable and internet? So they just go through those things, and then once they get to the end, we will go through here. It keeps a total up here at the top, and they can click back on these to go back to those, and you can see the total up here. So this is not going to, because we haven't answered all the questions, it's not going to be totally, you know, what we're trying to do here, but it gives you a good idea. So then it adds up the expenses. It shows monthly expenses, annual expenses, taxes, federal, state taxes, and then the total salary that's needed. And then once they continue to next on that one, it gives them how much education and training do you plan on completing. They can select those, and then it's going to talk about career clusters. which we have a career clusters assessment. So if they did that career cluster assessment first, then they might know which career cluster they are more geared to. I'll just choose a couple here. Okay, now that it's complete, these occupations meet your education and training career cluster preferences and pay enough to meet your required salary of $18,465 for Central Montana. So then you get a list of those occupations and how much education level and then the wages. And you can also see there's this little exclamation point. That just means that the occupation is based on nationwide data and may not be available in Central Montana at your required salary level. So when they do go through this, the whole thing, it does give them a really good idea of which types of occupations will fit those needs that they have. And the kids really like to go through this and do it, so it makes it a fun activity for them to do. So then again, you can always click on the occupation and then it will go give you an overview of that occupation. There might be a video. In this format, it's all about question and answer, so the overview and the topics are things like what will the work be like, and then it talks about relationships. You're going to be working with other people most of the time, physical conditions, you're going to work outdoors most of the time. We pick construction helpers, so that's why we're getting those. What skills do I need? A few of the skills. How much money would I earn? So because we're at the Department of Labor, we have the most current updated information on wage analysis. So we have all that. They can do annual, monthly, hourly, and they can also select different states. So if we want to go out to different states, we could do a couple here, and then it's going to load that up and show, now it shows Colorado, Michigan, and Montana. Will there be jobs in the future? So this shows how many jobs there are now. So in Montana, there are around 655 jobs for construction helpers, and the annual openings are around 29, which is high for Montana. And then it also shows you the United States, and you can also do different states for that as well, okay? There's a lot to the system. It's a very comprehensive system, so I'm sorry if I rush, but it's hard to get everything in there. So then you can also click on occupations, and it's going to show different occupations that are similar to construction helpers. So they could go and they could look at some different occupations. There's real-world interviews, and those are of people in that field. So this is Steve Sherman. He's a construction helper, and he talks about what he does at his job. Okay. So if we go back to assessments, we also have some, these are what we call some formal assessments. They are normed. And then we also have a couple of informal assessments that are pretty new. The learning style survey, they just put this into the system so that they can do it online. They go through and they do the same type of thing. They answer these questions. Can remember more after my teacher tells me about a subject at the front of the class. And they just go through and answer those. I don't think I have a little cheater method to get through those, so we'll just go through real quick and see what we get. Should be interesting. Okay, and then they just click on results, and then it comes out to be whatever type of learning style it comes out based on their answers. So I got auditory. a 28, and then it talks about what it is to be an auditory learner. And then there's also check out learning style study tips that they can go to find out different study tips for that. Okay, and there's employability skills survey. That's a pencil and paper type of skills survey that is another informal assessment that we have. Occupations, we just have lists of different occupations. We have information about the military, career clusters. So if we click on career clusters, that shows you all the different career clusters, and then it can be opened up there, and then it shows the different occupations by career cluster. Education, we have in the basic site, we have choosing a school, where can I study, programs of study information, Montana schools. So if they click on Montana schools, they can see all the schools, whether it's 2-year, beauty cosmetology, business secretarial, 4-year colleges and universities, or vocational schools not elsewhere classified. And they can actually open those up again and see the specific different schools. So in this one we have Job Corps centers, we have taxidermy, there's a school of massage, dog grooming, several different things that they can get information on. So say we were looking at a 2-year college. We could click on any of the 2-year colleges and get more information on what's available at that college. So they could get information on student body, the cost of the school, financial aid. They can also compare up to 3 different schools. So if they wanted to, they could do that. I'll just do that really quickly. And then it shows everything side by side. So now we have general information, the cost of the different schools. We also have student services and career services listed so that they can go out and see what's available to them. So services with students with disabilities, that will list that information. And if we don't have it, it's just because we send out surveys every year to these different schools and they send them back, so it just depends on what we get back from that school, what is shown in this area. And then it also has programs of study, so it shows the different programs of study that are available at those schools. So if we went to education, click on that. Oh. Patience is a virtue. Okay, so now it shows education, early childhood education and teaching, and they offer a certificate at Helena College. So they could then explore that more and find out more about what it's like to take that class and what they need to do. Apprenticeships, there's information on apprenticeship programs. We also have paying for school, so it gives them information on how they can pay for school, scholarship information. And then we have a lot of information under the employment tab. So we have a resume creator that's built into the system, and they just go through and they answer questions, put in their information basically. So they start with education and training, add their school, add achievements, activity, skills, stuff like that. And then once they're done entering all that information, they can create a resume. They can get different samples and then just create the resume. There's a way they can put in objectives, summary of qualifications. They can rearrange or take out anything they don't want to have. It can be saved as a Word, PDF, or a text document. So they can go in, download a resume, is going to save that resume to your flash or hard drive. Save resume is saving the resume to their portfolio. So whenever they log in with their login information to get to their portfolio, they'll always be able to have access to that resume. Let's see here. Also under employment, there's also, they can upload other resumes. So if they've done a resume outside of CIS, they could also upload that resume into the system and save it there. There's also information on job searching. So there's information on job interviews, starting your search, applications and resumes. There's some quick tips over here, people with disabilities, ex-offenders, college student, veterans, so on. So there's lots of really great information in here. Job interviews, there's this little video. The gentleman starts out with a really, really bad interview, and then they kind of go through that and say, what went wrong with this video, and here's what you need to do. And then they watch it again, and he does things the right way, the way he should do them.
Donetta, this is Kim. Sorry to interrupt, but we're just about out of time, and we did have a couple of questions come in, so I didn't know if you had a few final things you wanted to show or say.
Okay, yeah, let me just show, so under the portfolio is where each client will log in and create a portfolio. That's a very important part of this. And so they have where they can save favorites, and you also as an administrator can see any of the work that they've done. There's all kinds of reports you can get. So favorites, I don't think I have anything in here because it's the new basic site and I haven't played around in here and saved things. So any source and assessment, so this is going to show that we did the learning styles survey and the reality check. And then there's also a place where they can store outside files and links. So if they have an IP or some other kind of file, it could be scanned and added into their portfolio, and then that way they could have easy access to that. Their parents can also have a parent account if they want to, or you can give them access to their account so that they can see what their students are doing. And then there's also a personal learning plan that can be generated. So this comes out into a PDF, and then it just shows all their information that they've done inside of the CIS program. So it has career goals, education plans, the assessments that they've done, when they've done them, the career clusters they're interested in. There's a course planner, different test scores, all kinds of stuff here, post-secondary, volunteer, all that stuff. And then at the end there's a place where they can have their signature, a parent guardian signature, or a counselor advisor signature. So that's available as well. So one other thing, and then I'll be done. There is a way that you can link these sites together. So if you already have a high school or a Voc Rehab or whatever account, you can actually link two sites together. So I have our basic site linked to a high school site. So this is the high school site, and you can see it has a lot more information than the basic site does. So there's skills, all kinds of different things. So if you guys are interested, if you don't already have MCIS, you can contact me, and I think we can get you my contact information, and we can set you up. If you're in another state and you're interested in CIS, I can get you to the right person for that as well. So thank you, and that should do it.
Thank you very much, Donetta, and also thanks to Ellen and Mary for your presentations as well. We are out of time. We did have a few questions come in, so what I will do is I will email the presenters directly with those questions, and for those of you who asked the questions, we will get the responses back to you individually. For people who were unable to open the PowerPoint slideshow in the handout section, If you could send an email to me, this is Kim. My email address is brown@ruralinstitute.umt.edu, and I'm saying that quickly because I put it in the chat box already. If you send me a quick email, I can send you the PowerPoint as an attachment. Some people were able to open it, some were not. So let me know if you need that sent to you. Please remember that a short survey will pop up as you sign out of the webinar for today. And if you're interested in asking us to do a full webinar on MCIS, discovery, or any of the topics that were discussed today, please include that in your evaluation. The training calendar for pre-employment transition services is currently being developed for this upcoming school year, and so as soon as that's ready, we will share it with the PREETS online mailing list members. The recording for today's session will be posted to the Vocational Rehabilitation and Blind Services YouTube channel, and I put the URL or website address for that YouTube channel in your chat box. It can take a couple of weeks to get it posted. Thank you again to Ellen and Mary and Donetta for the fabulous information. Thank you to all of our audience members for taking time out of your day to join us and learn about assessments. Any final comments from any of our presenters?
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and we look forward to sharing more information.
Thanks for having us.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.